Introducing Clarendale Clayton, an innovative new luxury senior lifestyle community featuring independent living, assisted living, and memory care. Coming soon to the corner of Clayton and Hanley.
Well, I think that's our cue then. Thank you so much for joining us for this latest installment of our At Home series with the Clayton Community Foundation. And we are so excited for this webinar to welcome back to Clayton Liz Giardina, the Vice President of Design at Proenza Schouler, and she is in the fashion circle world a big shot. And wow, from Arundel Avenue to the top of the fashion world. So glad to talk to Liz and looking forward to learning from her what the latest is for summer and fall and beyond. Hey, special thanks to our luxury senior living community and presenting sponsor, Clarendale Clayton. For more information, everybody, go to clarendaleclayton.com, and thanks everybody for your support. You know, the Clayton Community Foundation was officially established in 2008 as a first-time not-for-profit 501c3 as a partner to the city of Clayton. It's focused on creating significant opportunities to benefit our area in terms of art, history, parks, and sustainability. The CCF, as we call it, has raised more than $10 million since 2008. And I'll tell you what, it's really making big changes. Look very soon for a new park on Maryland Avenue, just a little bit east of the library in downtown Clayton. It's going to become a literacy destination. The Clayton Community Foundation History Department releases a new episode every month with the Clayton Neighborhoods video series featuring St. Louis County historian Esley Hamilton. The videos have highlighted Hillcrest, Carswald, Beamiston, Clayton's forgotten African American neighborhood, Wydown Terrace, High Point, Damon, and others. There's also a historic markers program, which we are starting. The first one, recognizing the site of the Attic School, the school district of Clayton's second school to serve African American children, has been installed. And if you haven't taken the free AutoCast tour, do so now. You hear me talking about public art and historic sites in Clayton, Missouri. By the way, the Ralph Clayton Society honors donors who've given annual support of $1,000 and above to the Clayton Community Foundation. Society members are generous leaders in supporting the annual fund and committed to the Clayton community. For more information, claytoncommunityfoundation.org. Okay, so much for the prologue. Let's get into the heart of tonight's program. Liz Giardina from Arundel, Vice President of Design at Proenza Schouler White Label, which is now sold at Bergdorf Goodman and Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, Nordstrom, Lane Crawford Hong Kong, Selfridges London, Galeries Lafayette in Paris. She was the top designer with Derek Lam, 10 Crosby, held that position for 6 years, is the former head designer at Halston, where she created the Heritage collection. She was a visiting scholar at the Glasgow School of Art and a recipient of the Washington University Distinguished Alumni Award. Got that 6 years ago. There are many other achievements I could mention, but it's only an hour-long program, Liz. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on.
Well, my goodness, you grew up on Arundel, and I'm assuming you went to the Captain Grade School. Is that about right?
Yes, I did.
Did you study art or anything at Captain, which may have led to this great position that you have now?
I would say I was never the greatest at academics, and I always found my calling in anything that was creative. So whether that was, mostly the performing arts, dance, or the visual arts, that was always sort of where I felt the most comfortable. And I remember when I was at Captain, I had a first grade English teacher, and she had us do a project where instead of writing something, you could make a product. And so I made a can of soup that I called Pro Grosso. And I created all the ingredients for it and the label for it. And that was like a time where, I was sort of stood out as a student. So I always just gravitated towards the arts, and that's where I felt comfortable, and I kind of found my people and my joy.
Well, that was Ralph M. Captain, and then it was on to Wydown Middle, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And you danced at Coca as a girl growing up in our area.
Yeah, I danced at Coca. I was actually in the beginning of the Coca Dance Company, which is now just like way, way better than it was when I was there in terms of the talent and where that talent lands. But I danced there. That was a huge inspiration for me. I really started to realize in dance and studying dance and learning about other dancers and other choreographers that I had an interest in movement and how movement really affected the clothing you wore and how those clothes, draped on your body and how they reacted to, leaping and turning and all of that. And suddenly I just gravitated more towards the clothing aspect, the costume aspect than the dance aspect.
Most people want to forget their middle school experiences, but let's jump to high school then. What do you remember about being a Greyhound at Clayton High?
High school was wonderful for me. I felt like Clayton High School was very accepting. When I was there, the art room was kind of this mecca for anybody and everyone. And when I was there, there was an outdoor smoking lounge that was outside of the art area. And I don't know if that exists anymore. So the art area at lunchtime was people, that were interested in arts. They wanted to draw and paint and sculpt during their lunchtime, and kids that just didn't feel like they fit in and wanted to hang out there. And I always felt like the art teachers were really welcoming, and it just kind of became this place where everyone felt welcome. And it wasn't about, cliques or who's cool or who's not cool. It's just sort of, what are you making and what are you interested in? And I really gravitated towards that. I've always been somebody that never has really had been interested in groupthink or hanging out with a group of people. And I've always been really interested in individuals and what individuals have to say and their own self-expression. So that was a very pivotal time for me. And that at that time, it became very clear that I wanted to do something in the visual arts when I went to college and when I graduated from college.
Were there any teachers at Clayton that you remember or who were especially formative for you?
Oh, wow. Who do I remember? I don't know. I'm gonna have to come back to
you think about that. You then kind of went across Wydown Boulevard to Washington University. So you continued your studies in Clayton. And you.
Oh wait, hold on. Sorry, I just remembered somebody.
Yes.
Because I don't want to say that I forgot teachers at Clayton High School, because I loved my teachers at Clayton High School. There was an art teacher I had at Clayton High School named Ann Schreger.
Okay.
Who I think still lives in St. Louis. And she was a wonderful art teacher. She just was like a free spirit. She took all of the students on a field trip to see people's studios in downtown St. Louis. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, you can just make a life from being creative and make your own work and sort of contribute in your own way. And that was a very important field trip for me. It's probably the most important field trip I've ever been on, because it just sort of shined a light on hey, there's careers in this, there's careers in being creative and being creative in the way that you want to be.
And so after Clayton High, you didn't go to RISD or Savannah, you went to WashU.
Yeah, I really wanted to go to art school. I think that I belonged in art school. And when I was in high school, I took art classes at WashU. And so I had a relationship with some of the professors there. And then my mom also worked at WashU, so I had free tuition. So I had the benefit of going to this great school and not paying tuition. And then also I really wanted to study business as well, so I could do that at WashU. I actually ended up not pursuing the business part of my education because I just fell in love with the art school so much.
Okay, so what do you remember from Washington University largely?
Well, I had a professor at WashU named Ron Lex. He used to run the sculpture department. And I remember when I started at WashU, I was very adamant about wanting to study fashion design. And he, we in one conversation was like, oh, you're going to be in the sculpture department, which didn't make any sense for me, to me at the time. And then after I got to know him, he just had such a broad way of thinking about making work and making three-dimensional work and what that meant. And being in his department was such an incredible experience for me, because it allowed me to talk about 3D work and also not 3D work. People were doing sound art, they were doing internet-based art very early in that. And to critically look at other people's art and talk about it, and then to receive criticism, and just the ability to talk about creativity and art making outside of your own interest was very pivotal for me. It allowed me to just have a broad language about being creative.
Wow. And from Washington University, somehow you ended up as the vice president for design at Proenza Schouler White Label, which is kind of the secondary label. It's the offshoot from Proenza Schouler, which a lot of people know of really nice, fine dresses and clothing that is a little bit pricey. But would it be fair to say that the White Label is a little more approachable for many consumers?
Yeah, it's a little more approachable. I have developed a little bit of a niche in my career where I have, for 3 different brands, I've helped them start and run secondary businesses. It's interesting for me because it's a little division within a bigger brand. I always kind of start off as the stepchild. And then it has always, and this is the last example, grown into something that's been successful and really helped the brand. I like working at this price point because it's a little bit more approachable. It's generally slightly more casual. And from a selfish perspective, I wear the clothes more. So I really feel, specifically in this role I have now, that I'm very much designing for myself. And I think that makes the product stronger because I'm very in touch with, why we do certain things, what kind of clothes we need to be making, how they need to feel on the body, how they need to move when you walk, who this customer is, because I feel like I feel very close to that customer because in a lot of ways she's me.
Well, I talked to somebody about this label and she said it's kind of for people who are pretty busy. They have, they're working. They might also have kids. So they're looking for something that, they can kind of wear on the fly to get out of the house, but it's also got to be comfortable. And it's usually for an urban atmosphere, but very feminine, something like that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, I would give myself as an example. I have a child. I work full time. I'm very busy. I always have things happening on the weekend, like many other people my age, many other women my age. And the kind of product I make is extremely unfussy. The dress I have on right now, you just zip it up the front. You throw it over your head, you zip it up the front. A lot of the pants have like a little bit of elastic in them, or they're just like kind of easy to put on and wear. And then they're kind of clothes that, we say at Proenza Schouler that White Label is the casual expression of our customer. But I think in a lot of ways, specifically in, what we've seen in the last year plus, our lives are becoming a lot more casual. So these are really the clothes that, you're wearing most of the time, unless you dress up for work, unless you're an attorney and, or work in business where you need to be very polished. Most people are wearing these clothes all the time. So it's a lot of fun to design those clothes. Sure. And I feel, and I, as I said before, I feel very close to that customer.
Well, my wife looked at one of your dresses with me when we were examining, doing a little due diligence before the interview, and she saw the dress. She said, "Oh, it's got pockets. I love pockets."
Yeah, I mean, I would say 95% of our dresses have pockets. It's just about attitude. It's about how you stand in the clothes. I mean, everyone's an expert in clothes because everybody puts clothes on. Like, people always ask me, like, what should I wear? I'm like, you know yourself better than I do, but how the attitude that clothes gives you is something that it's like you have to be very in tune with that. And there's little things like, the positioning of seams or pockets or how you put the garment on that can really change the attitude of the garment. And that's fun to think about when you're designing it. And pockets is one of those things. I mean, I don't like to carry a big purse anymore. I like to throw my keys in my pocket, my phone in my pocket, and run out the door on the weekend. So it's great to have, pockets in my dress.
Now, how do you know what people like and what they're willing to buy? How does the designer figure that out?
I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to be a designer rather than an artist is I still am very interested in the commerce aspect of it. And I'm interested in the relationship with the customer. And I just feel like a little bit of it is instinct. I work with merchandisers, so I have people that give me reports, we need this many dresses, things at this price point. And then it's a little bit about just like the feel, like, what does she want? What makes her life better? What makes her life easier? what can she own for a long time? And a lot of times when I think about a new season, when I concept a new season, it's just, it's like, what do I want? I don't want a bunch of things in my life that I throw away. I don't want to change out my closet all the time. I want my life to always be easier, to be less complicated. I want more time for joy and fun in my life. So my clothes need to service that. So I'm always just kind of locking into that. And then as I start to think about developing a collection, I start to gravitate towards things. Maybe I see somebody on the street wearing something, and I like to think about what I'm designing way in advance so I can gather ideas, so that when it's time to really concept that season, I'm very sort of locked into what I'm interested in, and it feels not rushed and enjoyable. But I just sort of feel like I kind of just know what to do a lot of times. Like I'm very keyed into what I want and what the customer wants.
Well, I must say, if you were the head designer at Halston, and if you were the top designer at Derek Lam, 10 Crosby, and now with Proenza Schouler, you obviously know what you're doing. Do you actually, with your job, and in just a moment, everybody, we're going to see some of the great work of our guest, Liz Giardina, at least the stuff the clothing that we'll see this summer and fall, I think. But do you end up drawing it and draping it and fitting it, or is that a level below you?
No. So I have always worked for companies where design is very, very involved in product. It's different at every company. I've always worked for design-led businesses. So the designers are usually the founders of the business. And so, I mean, I will walk you through the process when I show you a little bit of the visuals, but every part of the process I'm involved in, from the concepting of the collection to the actual 3D concept styling, I call, where I'm pulling vintage clothes and draping clothes and grabbing my own clothes and archive clothes and my husband's clothes and whatever it is, and throwing that together and kind of creating an idea of what the collection is going to look like, to the drawing and the selecting the fabrics and all of that. So I'm very involved in, and I do a lot of it myself. I mean, I'll even like sew parts of garments to give examples to pattern makers of like, this is what I want, etc.
Wow, that's hands-on. Well, without further ado, let's get to some of the visuals, and you can take it away. Show us the process and what you've created and how you're doing it.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So this is just a little kind of sample of how I work and how I think about product. So basically, when I started working at Proenza, I initially was working on the main collection, the commercial part of the main collection, and then starting to slowly develop what the secondary line was going to be. And then this has really blossomed into the meat of my job. But the exercise that I've always done when I start one of these secondary collections is try to figure out who the customer is. And usually that's a lot of visual storytelling. So this is just an example of, as I started the secondary collection, who this woman is. And all of these images, they might seem random, but they're all very, like, chosen very specifically for an attitude. The way the woman looks, she's not heavily made up. She's a little bit natural. She is generally between the ages of, I would say, like 30 and maybe 55. Doesn't wear a lot of print. And just sort of her attitude and the way that she lives. And like you said before, she's a little bit urban, etc. So I will create this board. And often I also do this other exercise where I show how she lives, like what her home looks like, what she does in her free time, and anything that she's interested in. So I'll sort of create this visual storytelling. And then as I start to think about a season, I will start to pull images that are interesting to me. And sometimes they're quite random, and then I just start to make sense of them. So I will put these images together in ways that start to tell me the direction of the collection, the color palette, the kind of materials that I want to use. These are a lot of art examples. And then I'll often look at clothes, and I make these collages, and I look at other people's clothes and vintage clothes. And, here I love this coat in the upper left because it has this high slit so she can put her hand in her pocket. I love this kind of like wrap plastic lavender coat. The dress in the middle is about things that sort of cross in the back. So everything kind of nods to something that I'm interested in. And then generally there will be a little bit of a print or motif direction. So clearly here it was about gingham. This was for our launch season when we launched this collection. So we wanted to do things that were very classic, gingham, animal print, etc. So then this is a good sort of visual of animal print. So animal print in knitwear, animal print in woven fabrics, mixing animal prints, etc. And actually the skirt at the bottom right is a skirt that I had done when I was working on mainline as well. And I just was like, oh, that attitude of that skirt felt very much like something we should do for White Label. And then I do this process called concept styling. So what this is I pull vintage garments, I drape clothes, I pull my own clothes, I'm stealing clothes from people all the time, men, women, whomever. And then I put them on a model and I start to get a visual of, okay, what is this gonna look like? And then we Photoshop a lot of things. Like some things in here aren't actually real clothes. It's a swatch that we put up and then we Photoshopped it different ways. I mean, I could go through style by style, but this is really like a hodgepodge of different ways of creating looks, you know, and like sometimes I just put a little shoelace around a skirt or something. I'm like, oh, I think it needs to have like a little trim detail. And this is just allows me to see the direction that we're going to go into as we start to draw and select materials, etc. And then I started the process of drawing. So as I said before, I've always worked for design-led businesses. It's really important for the companies that I've worked for that you can draw really well, that you can convey your ideas, not just to designers, but to, you know, I've had to sit in board meetings and talk about this collection, to my CEO. You know, I do periodic business meetings where I talk about the progress of what we're working on. So I have to draw very, very clearly what the product is going to look like so a lot of people can comprehend and understand it. So I start to draw everything in a very detailed way. This is just sort of more drawings. I will work on the wovens and the knits. I do have some support in knitwear because it's so technical. And then from there, we will actually make the clothes. So we will fit the clothes several times. So we'll make a couple of different prototypes. We will select the fabrics. And then we actually make, you know, obviously have the final samples made, have a market for them and show the clothes. And then, so this is just some of like the final products. You can see, like, for instance, that coat that I pointed out at the beginning that has the big slit in the side and the buttons, like this is what it became. It became a double face cashmere wool coat. It feels like a loose, easy sweater. You can put your hands in the pocket of a skirt. The attitude is really easy and relaxed. It's another picture of that. This idea of animal prints and mixing animal prints, we did in this jacquard knit that was like a big sort of structured sweatshirt, but very soft. And it kind of went from a zebra into a cheetah print. Again, knitwear is very important for us because it's very relaxed and easy. And then here you see an example of the gingham and how we interpreted it. And I don't know if you noticed when I showed you the gingham images, there was a lot of transparency in gingham. So we like the idea of things feeling kind of fuzzy and layered. So that's how we made the print. And then again, here's that same idea of gingham and mixing it with animal print. We love knitwear. We love fine gauge knitwear, chunky knitwear. We love the idea of like little kind of details like slits and things to make things feel more novel. So this is a knit with a sort of paper bag elastic pant. And then we did this kind of like sort of poppy logo thing in the first launch season that had our address and our name to kind of say that like we sort of were existing as a brand. And then I'll just show this one more season. So this was pre-fall 2020. And this season was really inspired by pajamas, which is kind of an ongoing inspiration for me. I love clothes that people wear at home. I love lazy clothes. I love when people feel relaxed in their clothing. So I was looking at a lot of pajama images. Again, I was looking at a little bit of gingham, stripes, etc. And then just different like necklines and kind of attitudes and a little bit of more knitwear inspiration on this page, and then a little bit of leather inspiration. And then here's that concept styling. So a lot of these things are kind of photoshopped together, or they're like sort of sliced and diced. But you see like this sort of on the top row, you see these striped looks. So this kind of pajama attitude, a lot of softness in the attitude of the pants, and like kind of pockets in pants and in skirts that are low and easy. So it's just sort of playing with all of these ideas. And then again, I start this kind of sketching process to sort of understand what the shapes are and sort of can kind of articulate the direction we're going to go into. So more of that. And then these are some of the final clothes. So I love this model. I love that she's in her late 40s. She's been modeling forever. She was a big Alexander McQueen model. I love that she's not very made up. And I love her just at home. And this was actually taken in her home in Hudson, New York. So the sweater with this kind of irregular stripe, this sort of pajama, caftan, and pant look that was really pretty on. And then we do a lot of things with using top stitch to like articulate style lines and the shape of a woman's body. So that's what you see on the left. And on the right is this kind of like, almost like it's a dress, but sort of like this like romper, sort of fun, wash cotton, easy dress. And then on the left, this was our idea of a pajama. So we did it in this beautiful green with a black piping, and then we did it in black with a white piping. It was just like a really like modern, clean pajama, but it's a tailored pant. But it has that ease to it. And then on the right was sort of my interpretation of leather for this collection. So it has elastic, it has a zipper in the front. It's like this little easy leather bomber jacket. And then this is just sort of the last slide, which is a poplin dress that has an elastic that goes to the front, and then the back sort of swings away from the body and has these pockets. So it shows the woman's body in the front, but in the back, it's just really easy and relaxed. So that's it. I'll come back.
That's just amazing. Well, a couple of things here. First of all, I love the fact that you told us you were not, really into academics, or I guess studies were not your thing. And I think, wow, that is so inspiring to so many kids out there who might be going to Clayton or any other grade school or high school and may not have been, maybe the top of the class. Is that what you suggested earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always had to work really hard in school. My brother did not have to work as hard. I feel like academics came easier for me. And I've always just been really excited and energized by self-expression and people trying things. And I think when I talk about Clayton High School and, the smoking lounge and the arts and then the art room, it was just kind of this place where I felt like everyone was welcome, and the art teachers made a point of that. Right. And that was really important to me. And I think it's really important that you can, just because one thing is not your thing, school is not your thing, that doesn't mean that there's not other places that you can be very successful.
Right. Also, it seems to me your command of the English language is so expert, and it helps you really sell the product because you can describe it so well. I don't know. You must have taken an English course somewhere that really helped you. I don't know if it was WashU or White Elm Middle or Clayton High School or Captain. So, but I have a question, Liz. When you walk onto a plane or go into a restaurant and you see your clothing, do you say, "Excuse me, ma'am, I hate to interrupt you, but do you know that I designed that"?
No, absolutely not. I look exactly at what is wrong with it and what I would do to improve it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's funny. I once asked Curtis Sittenfeld, who's a best-selling novelist who lived on Aberdeen. I said, if you walk onto a plane and you see someone reading one of your books, do you say, "Hey, I wrote that"? She goes, "No, I wouldn't do it." And I only asked that because I would. Now, I'm not sure I saw much leather, but you like leather. Is leather popular now, and will you be using it with the white label?
Yeah, we do leather. We also do faux leather. We just did a bunch of like faux leather, faux suede, and faux shearling. Yeah, I mean, we incorporate it when appropriate. I mean, white label is less expensive than our main collection, but it is still an expensive collection. I have a leather pant that's $900. So that just shows you that, like, for us, that's less. It's considered a secondary line, but it's still an expensive product. So we use leather, and we use really beautiful leather. But we'll do 2, maybe 3 pieces a season.
Liz, there was a time when people always said, "Oh, here's the color that you're going to see this fall." Do people in New York and fashion circles still say that? "Oh, this is the color for 2021"?
No, I mean, there was a big article in the New York Times last week about how fashion is kind of coming from everywhere in all directions now. It's not coming from, the sort of larger, bigger designers. it's coming from somebody in Omaha that has a TikTok, a high schooler in Omaha that has a TikTok that's interesting. You know, I feel like design and trends and what's interesting is coming at me from all different angles. And it doesn't feel like it's trickling top down in terms of like, hey, red is really important. And that to me is interesting and liberating in a lot of ways.
Do you ever walk into the stores and ask the people who work there what the customers are saying?
I don't do that specifically, but what I do that I really like is before COVID, I was traveling and I would sometimes go with the salespeople, more at Derek Lam than at Proenza, and meet the people that work on the store and do morning meetings with them and find out what their customers were interested in. And then now I just did one live shopping event at Proenza, and I'm going to continue to do them where I just talk about product in a live format, and people can shop the product or they can ask me questions. And that's really interesting and really exciting for me, just because it allows me to get feedback. I think sometimes as a designer and sometimes living in New York City, you're kind of like stuck with one viewpoint, and it doesn't really always relate to everybody else outside of the country or outside of your little sphere. So it's good for me to always get feedback from people.
You bet. Well, we do have more questions, and we're inviting people to pose some questions. So if you're watching our webinar with Liz, please share your questions, and we'll get those front and center. We also have a poll that's for everybody watching at this time. If you're watching this on YouTube months down the line, you won't be able to participate, of course, but here we go. Questions for our audience. In your closet, you're going to find a perfect balance of clothes, no updates required, only classics. I dress for function and versatility. I enjoy shopping for new trends, but have a personal style that I adhere to. My wardrobe needs updating. It's been a while since I've shopped for myself, and I only wear the latest trends or styles and stay in vogue all year. Well, before we go to question 2, do you have an answer for that, Liz?
I would say I enjoy shopping for new trends, but I have a personal style that I adhere to. I'm not really that focused on trends. I just want to look great in my clothes, and I'm always refining what that means. But yeah.
Question 2. How do you feel when you go shopping for new clothes? Excited? You love exploring new trends? Nervous? You have trouble adapting to new trends? Can't keep up? I ask others for advice. Don't like to overthink my clothes, already too much to think about, and help. Any comments?
I mean, I actually, my favorite thing in the whole world to do is vintage shop. So I love shopping for clothes, especially when it's old clothes or maybe like smaller brands. I think that's really fun. And especially now that I haven't been able to be in stores as much as I usually am, it's always exciting to get out and see product.
Do you ever think that it's possible, maybe you don't realize this, but you know, before I put on this suit coat tonight, I thought to myself, oh, I wonder if she's going to sit in judgment of this one. But when people meet you, they probably are a little intimidated at times, Liz, because you know, you're kind of like the top of the fashion world, and here they are showing up either casually or professionally and wearing something. It might be a little intimidating.
I think if you know me well, you probably get over that really fast. I mean, I'm really like, I love people. I'm very Midwestern in that way. I'm really excited about what people wear, whether I think it's great or not. It's fascinating to me. I was at a birthday party in New Orleans a couple weekends ago, and there was a woman there who's a writer, who's written a bunch of amazing books, and every night she wore a different pair of Crocs, like 3 nights in a row. And I couldn't get enough. I just thought it was fabulous. So I just am interested in people and then the choices that they make. Oh, this is interesting.
Well, here's the results. In your closet, most people said they'll find their wardrobe needs updating. It's been a while that they've shopped for themselves. So you've got to have a trip to the store and rectify that. In second place, people will find a perfect balance of clothes, no updates required. And then, how do you feel when you go shopping for new clothes? 40% said I get excited. I love exploring new trends. That was tied with don't like to overthink my clothes, already too much to think about. Both are great. Now, I do think it's amazing that when people are going into places like Lane Crawford Hong Kong or Nordstrom or Selfridges London, they're looking at clothes that were put together by a woman who grew up in Clayton, Missouri. But how was the transition for you to New York? Tell us about that.
Before I moved to New York, I was in LA for almost 2 years. I always wanted to live in New York. I came to New York for the first time when I was 7. And I was very excited because everything felt like the movie Flashdance, which was my favorite movie. And then when I moved to New York at 25, I found it really hard. I felt like, I came from a very nurturing environment. And then I sort of was living in a city where I didn't have a lot of money. I had cockroaches in my East Village apartment, and work was really hard. And nobody, sort of cared I was from St. Louis and I went to WashU. So it took me about 3 or 4 years to adjust to living in New York. And that adjustment period was difficult. I don't think I realized that it was difficult while it was happening. And then once I adjusted to living in New York and figured out where I was going and found a place to live that I loved and friends, and work that was interesting and to me, and I felt, I was contributing, then I was like, oh, that was a hard adjustment. New York is not an easy place. When you don't have resources, financial resources, and you're struggling to make it, and you're competing with a lot of really talented people.
Well, I must say, I thought that real quickly, because it's not about me, but in my 20s, I was 28 years old, making $12,500 a year, living in Boston. I thought the 20s were a really difficult experience. And because when you're struggling, you're starting out. In fact, I talked to a guy today who started a business when he was 25, but this was in St. Louis. And he recalls early on that when he went to business meetings, he always made sure he was facing the window because when he was starting his business, he was in such bad financial shape. He was afraid that someone was going to be repossessing his car. And you're right about New York. It's great if you've got some money, I suppose, but if you don't have much money, it may not have quite the same allure.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm mentoring a design student, and she's 21, and she got an internship and a scholarship for the internship to be here for the summer. And I'm looking at New York again through the eyes of somebody that age, and just all of the struggles and how challenging it is, how wonderful and exciting it is to be here, and then just how hard it can be to be here. And that's something that, I don't think is worth glossing over, because I think there's a lot of challenges to moving to someplace where you don't have family, where you don't have a ton of friends, and trying to work in a really competitive industry.
For sure. Although Frank Sinatra said, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, but it's up to you. What was your big break? Was it getting to Halston to become the designer of the Heritage Collection?
No, I mean, that was a really challenging job for a lot of reasons. I actually finally felt good about my career and relaxed in my career when I started working for Derek Lam. Derek was really supportive of me. He initially interviewed me to work for his collection, and then reached out to me and was like, I think you could head a new division for us, which I initially was not very excited about, because as a designer, I always wanted to be working in the most expensive product with the most expensive materials and all of the resources available, and, an atelier in-house. So you're working with pattern makers and all that. So the idea of kind of continuing some of what I'd done at Halston, because at Halston I had done designer clothes and also more contemporary product. But continuing in the more contemporary product area was not so exciting to me initially. But then when he was like, this is going to be your own division and you're going to oversee it and build it, and I want you to do all the press, and that wasn't evident right away. But as it started to unfold, I was like, oh, somebody who I have so much respect for, is really talented, loved in the industry, has a lot of faith in me, wants me to hire whomever I want to hire, design the product I want to make, and really believes in my vision. I think then I started to feel way more confident about who I am as a designer and my contribution to women's clothing.
Wow. Our first question comes from Dina Connor, who writes, what's one classic that every woman should own?
Every woman and every man should own a great white shirt. And I believe in the family closet, by the way. You can sometimes share that garment.
Wow.
I wear a lot of my husband's clothes. Yeah. I mean, I aspire to have a closet that's just, white shirts, great slacks. I almost like want a man's closet. I don't think that will happen because I love clothes. So I'm always, wanting something new and interesting. But I think everyone needs the perfect white shirt. You can wear it to work. You can dress it. You can wear it black tie. There's ways to do that. You can walk your dog with a great white shirt. I mean, it's just limitless.
That's fascinating. Did the pandemic change the way Americans or others are wearing clothing?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, everyone was talking about, people wearing more athleisure and sweatsuits and all of that. I think being comfortable in your clothes became more important, and I think that should always be important. I've been kind of energized and excited about it because I think people are thinking a little bit more about how do they feel in their clothes and less a little bit about presentation, and that's interesting to me. And I think also it kind of again made trend less important. It's people have a more sort of individual approach to clothing. I will say that throughout the pandemic, I did not wear sweatsuits. I continued to wear jeans. I was not fully subscribing to spandex all the time or sweatsuits all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, do we find you in New York City right now when we're speaking to you?
I'm actually in Brooklyn right now at my house.
In Brooklyn. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
God's country for sure. Hey, we're inviting more questions. You can just go to that little chat area and type away. We are, of course, invite everybody to do so, but sometimes people wait to the last minute and then we lose a few toward the end of the hour because people were a little reluctant at first. So share your questions right now for Liz, who will be with us to the bottom of the hour or thereabouts. I got to tell you something. There's many young women who are probably watching this who are thinking, wow, how do I get from here to there? What advice do you have?
It's interesting because, as I told you before, I've been mentoring this younger designer. I think that I think my career, like a lot of other careers, is a little bit about like putting your head down and doing the work, and realizing that you have to do a lot of hard work to be successful. And I think that is a really important lesson. I've had many experiences in my career and many parts of jobs that were really challenging, and I had to almost just show up and get through them, and to kind of get to the other side of them and then figure out what the lessons learned are. And I think equally important is just being excited about what you're doing and always finding new ways of being excited about it and bringing that enthusiasm and positivity to the people that you work with. I love work. I love working with other people. I have a ton of fun at work. And I think it's part of the reason why people want to have me around. Because I'm like, what are we doing? Let's talk about it. What'd you do this weekend? What's interesting to you? Do you like this? It's like always an open, fun dialogue. And people want to be around that kind of energy. So to me, it's a combination of like, put your head down, do the work, and then be a fun and excited and energized and optimistic person, and bring that to every environment you're in, and people are going to want to have you around. And then also, obviously, you have to be good at your job. So I spent a lot of my 20s getting better at work. And I don't feel like I spent a lot of my 20s doing like partying and doing other stuff. I feel like as I got older, then I was like, oh, no, I can have more fun because I have more money and I feel more secure. But when I was in my 20s, I felt like I was just constantly proving myself.
Delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what they say you have to do. How do you feel about accessories? This is from Alice Abrams. Jewelry.
Hi, Allie.
Do these things make the outfit or detract from the outfit?
Okay, well, I know Allie very well, and Allie wears beautiful Bakelite jewelry. So she knows that jewelry just makes an outfit better. I love accessories. With accessories, you don't have to worry about sizing. Not shoes, but with bags and scarves and hats and jewelry, anybody can wear them, any size. You can wear them your whole life. I think jewelry is really wonderful, specifically because it can mean a lot to somebody. You know, I have like these earrings were my mother's earrings. You know, this ring that I'm wearing was my husband's grandfather's ring. You know, there's things that I wear on my body every single day that have a lot of meaning to me because the people that gave them to me are very important in my life. So in that way, they bring me a lot of joy, and it's not something you have to think about. So yeah, I think accessories and specifically jewelry can just be such like a wonderful way and a meaningful way to can just decorate yourself.
Liz, do you have a favorite material?
In terms of fabric?
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. I'd say I love cotton poplin. I'm wearing poplin right now. Like men's Oxford shirting and poplin I love. What else do I really like? I like cashmere, like really fine cashmere sweaters that are not hot and sweaty. Yeah, no, it's kind of limitless. So I also collect textiles. So I'm always buying indigenous textiles, and I have a huge textile collection. Fabrics and how you make fabrics is really important to me. I do a lot of fabric development at work. So fabrics are very important in terms of like how I design a garment. So it always starts from the fabric, and then that leads to the design.
It also seems like you folks at Proenza Schouler White Label like tie-dye.
So tie-dye is very signature to the brand. So we do tie-dye throughout the brand, and it sells really well. I think it has a lot to do with our co-founders and their kind of attitude and their sort of general energy. And for me, tie-dye it's wild, it's loose, it never looks the same. It's always interesting to people because no piece is like the other. So it's something that we're constantly incorporating in our collection.
It also seems like Proenza Schouler is maybe the most mispronounced name in fashion. I'm probably mispronouncing it all night long, but maybe you could tell our viewers about the etymology, Proenza Schouler.
So Proenza Schouler is our co-founder's mother's maiden names. So that is why they chose those two names for the brand. They picked the name when they met in their early 20s and they had dropped out of Parsons and started the brand. I think it's hard to pronounce, and I think that that's part of what's interesting for people. Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky to work for this brand right now because the brand is growing and it's been around for 20 years, but we have a lot of momentum and people are still very excited about it as a New York brand.
Yeah, the owners started when they were in college at Parsons, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Great American success story.
Yeah, they met in school. And they were the same year at Parsons, and yeah, they have had this brand since they were in their early 20s, and it's been phenomenally successful. And I really feel like in the last couple of years we've had a really kind of natural stride, and we're very in touch with the customer, and the business is growing even during COVID.
Well, now obviously a lot of the sales are online, even though you have stores in Paris and New York and Hong Kong, London, but let's face it, you can be in St. Louis and Omaha and buy it. And is it interesting to you to see where it's going, where the sales are going around the world? Yeah,
of course. I mean, that's why when I was at Derek Lam, more so than at Proenza, I did a lot of sales traveling, which is unusual for a designer, because it's so interesting to see who's buying the clothes and what their feedback is on the clothes. Yeah, that's endlessly fascinating to me. And I think it's important when we're thinking about product and designing product to really know the customer and to know what she needs. And the customer in Austin, Texas is really different than the customer than in Dallas, Texas, and is very different than the customer in New York. So as we start to build what the collection is and plan for the collection, we have to think of all of those different women and what they need.
Well, we hope to see some sales from Clayton then. But when you're in St. Louis, and you might get here 4 times a year or so when there's not a pandemic, as I understand it, what do you think about fashion in St. Louis, Missouri?
I mean, I love clothes and I love watching people wear clothes. So I am not a pretentious person about fashion at all. So I am really inspired wherever I go. I shamelessly take pictures of people constantly. So I'd have to say that when I'm in St. Louis, I'm always seeing people dressed in a very interesting and exciting way. I mean, I've come to St. Louis for fashion specific events, but even, my mom and her friends, like they have their own approach to clothes, and that's interesting to me. And I'm also just interested in how people wear clothes, even people that don't care about clothes and aren't interested in clothes. I have an uncle that, he shops at Cabela's, and I'm always like, what is that zip away pant that's a short that's, bug repellent? I don't know. I mean, just like, it's always fascinating to me.
If I might talk about your family just a little bit.
Yeah.
As I did live around the corner from you guys for a while, so I know your dad just a little bit, Jasper, great guy. Mm-hmm. And his cousin, Jasper Giardina, probably had the world's largest radio collection on Cherokee on Antique Road for years. He also was a purveyor of fruit baskets. He was an amazing fellow who also served his country in Korea. He really had a great big heart, was always helping people out. But truth be told, that radio collection was insane.
Yeah.
There were room after room of radios in his antique radio museum. I don't know what happened to that. Do you have any idea?
No, I don't know. I should ask my father. We were actually talking about him yesterday, but I didn't ask. Yeah. And my son is named Jasper after my dad, and that's a name in my father's family. So yeah,
love it.
Sweet. Yeah.
Love it. And now your mom, is it possible she's in the White Castle Hall of Fame?
Yeah, my mom was White Castle Craver of the Year 2002, I believe.
This is true.
This is true. Yeah, she was Craver of the Year 2002 with my grandfather, who used to do pro bono law work for White Castle employees in St. Louis because he loved White Castle so much. So they wrote an essay together and were Craver of the Year. And I love White Castle. Like my whole family we used to get White Castle on the way to my grandparents because my grandmother couldn't cook. So we would eat White Castle on the way to my grandparents' house.
Are you able to get White Castle in Brooklyn?
So there was a White Castle around the corner from my apartment, actually 2 apartments, for years and years and years. And then it finally closed. And I think they're building an apartment building there, but I used to go to White Castle. When I met my husband, sometimes after we would be out late, we would go to White Castle. Yeah.
I think Danny Meyer, who was with us in this series, said that White Castle was one of the inspirations for Shake Shack.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, who didn't know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what do you, as now a New Yorker, you're part of the Clayton diaspora living in New York, and there are a lot of Claytonians there, that's for sure. You and Claire Savitz and Danny Meyer and Andy Cohen, and actually the list goes on and on. We know that to be true. But about, I guess 8 months ago, Liz, people were writing the obituary for New York City. They were saying, oh, it's over. People are all going to work remotely, and who needs New York and its taxes when you've got Florida and you can work, do Zoom meetings for the rest of your life. What do you say about this?
I mean, have you ever been to New York? Like, there's just nothing better. I mean, I came to New York, I told you, for the first time when I was 7, and nobody could figure out why my luggage was so heavy. And it was because I had a metal index card box filled with change that I brought and didn't tell my parents because that was going to be my spending money. And people were dancing in Times Square, and I was out, they let me, stay up till midnight. And the energy of this city is it's just the most fabulous place. We just bought a new house during the pandemic. I love living in New York. I love all the young people in New York. I love the people that age in New York City. It's just a really wonderful place to live if you enjoy it. And I don't think New York is ever going to go anywhere. And I'm really excited to be here right now, especially.
I'm so happy to hear that. Was one able to take advantage of maybe, obviously there's no such thing as affordable real estate in New York, but did it become slightly more reasonable during the pandemic? Yeah,
there was definitely a little dip. There were moments where I felt a little crazy making a real estate decision during the pandemic, but there was a little dip. But in Brooklyn, real estate is very hot. And I
Yeah.
think in the city, it's gotten more affordable. There was a great article in the Times about how this is the summer of youth in the city, and all these people are moving into the city in apartments they couldn't afford before. And I'm like, I'm so incredibly jazzed to be here. And every time I go anywhere, when you walk through Soho, it's just people in their 20s and their young 30s out hanging out, and it's just wonderful to see.
And back in, I mean, I'm so happy to hear that, because I do think it's one of the world's greatest cities, and just walking down the street puts a little extra bounce in your step. Just to be on the sidewalk in New York City. I mean,
Yes.
Wydown Boulevard has its advantages on a Saturday morning, because that's kind of fun and beautiful and lots of trees and all that. But there's only one New York. Well, we're almost at the end of the program. When you do come back to St. Louis, are there any foods in Clayton or beyond that you, in addition to White Castle, obviously, that you're going to visit, and maybe introduce young Jasper to?
Well, I'm going to be back in St. Louis in a couple weeks. I'll be having Pappy's barbecue when I arrive.
Wow.
Delivered. And then Louis Dumont. We
Yep.
went there when we were actually in St. Louis in June, and it was the first time my husband and I went out in months, because we had no childcare, and so we had dinner outside at Louis Dumont, and we had this fabulous cod dish that they gave us the recipe for, and I've been communicating with them throughout the pandemic about. So I'll be going back there and eating. And then besides that, I'll probably be cooking with my mom and my dad and my husband, and just enjoying being home. But there's a lot of great food to be had in St. Louis. I'm a really big Provel fan. There is a pizza place down the street from me called Speedy Romeo in Brooklyn, and the owner's father, I believe, is from St. Louis. So they have a Neapolitan pizza that has Provel on it. That is a dream come true. And every time I go there, they also bring me my own little plate of Provel cheese to snack on while I wait for my pizza.
Well, I actually interviewed that guy once years ago. It is true. They serve pizza with Provel cheese in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And as they say, there's no accounting for taste. And it's a big world. And that's why I will say this, as we say goodbye, thank you. You're so talented, and you're so nice to take our questions. But honest to goodness, I have followed illustrious St. Louis for a long time. The people here who work here, and the people who are elsewhere who came from here. And I just can't think of another designer from our town. Am I missing something? I mean, a famous top.
I mean, I would say I'm famous, but I don't know. I can't think of anyone either.
I think you're the one.
Yeah. I don't know anyone else who's a designer off the top of my head. I mean, I'm constantly meeting young people that are going into design or want to go into design to live in St. Louis. I actually have an intern in my office right now who's from St. Louis. But
Great.
No, I don't know anybody else.
Well, that may change, because as you know, we have the Fashion Fund, and the idea is to create a lot of jobs in the fashion industry by the year 2030. And they're going great guns, and they've got the best attitude possible. But I'm just trying to think, in Milan, Paris, New York, another Liz Giardina. We'll find one, I'm sure, because St. Louis has just about everything. But that's for another occasion. Young Jasper is waiting for you, and I want to thank you so much for joining us for At Home. I really learned a lot about the fashion world, and you're very inspiring, both with your talent and your wonderful attitude about life. So Liz Giardina, thank you so much. We wish you the best, and have a wonderful visit back to St. Louis in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Charlie. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll be back in the fall, as we're going to take July and August off from our At Home series, but we'll be back in September. So check this space for details. Have a great evening. And thanks again. Don't forget, you can get more information at ClaytonCommunityFoundation.org.